Welcome to Bent Brewers Live, proudly brought to you by Bent Spoke Brewing Co. Here we are sitting here again. It's been a few months since we've done one of these, so it's good to be back sitting in front of you guys and talking about beer, something that I'm pretty passionate about. We're going to be talking sessionable sours tonight. Some of you may have noticed we've got a little new beer out in the market and it's perfect for summer. Sessionable sours are also perfect for summer, so we're going to have a bit of a chat about that. First of all, though, I'd like to just get in and tell people about our little 360 lid and why people keep writing in and asking us where it's gone and why it isn't around anymore. Well, unfortunately, we can't get them anymore. And the manufacturer in the US has decided not to make them anymore. And on top of that, the EPA in New South Wales has decided that they contribute to the litter stream. Can you believe that? Our little lid contributes to the litter stream in Sydney. Anyway, they've banned us from selling them in New South Wales from May next year. So we've had to transition to a more traditional lid, and that's why you're seeing that type of lid on our cans now. You can enjoy the 360 lid at the moment on Sprocket. We're keeping that going till the death and maybe after the death until they really tell us we have to stop. We are going to work on our own lid too. So not sure the time frame on that one, but we've started the long, exhausting process of coming up with your own can lid. And that will have some sort of 360-ness to it. So stay tuned for that. But we are here talking about sessionable sours, and I'd like to just big shout out to everyone down there in Victoria who has been under lockdown for a long time, and finally they all got out earlier in the week or on last week it was, and can go to the pub now and have a beer. And probably one of the custodians of sessionable sours in Australia from Stomping Ground, Asher Hall's joining us tonight. Welcome, Asher.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Asher's been making these beautiful smashes for a long time, and probably one of the people who started making those in even in his previous job at another brewery. Maybe, Asher, you want to talk about how you got into beer?
Yeah, I think it's probably somewhat of a common story for probably about 10 years ago when I fell into it. I was studying in uni in Wollongong and got a job in a brew pub, and pretty quickly became friends with the brewer and started working over in the brewery with him after a few weeks of working in the bar, just cleaning kegs and doing odd jobs here and there. And within a few weeks, he asked me if I wanted to brew. And so one thing led to another. I finished my uni degree, but worked as a brewer throughout. And when it came time at the end of my degree, I either had two paths to take. One was to be a brewer, one was to be an engineer. And I had a job offered to me in Melbourne, and I took that. So carried on and moved down here and started up Stomping Ground started work in 2015 and actually opened the joint in 2016.
Yeah, cool. I remember a long time ago, Asher, you're going to uni in Canberra and coming and hanging out at the Wigan Pen way back in the day.
Mate, I should have actually led with that. That's probably where I always liked beer, but I came back from a year away in 2003 after I'd started uni, and went away in 2003, came back in 2004, and my mates in the time that I'd been away at uni had found the Wigan Pen. I don't know how we didn't find it when we first all started uni, but that was the local. It was the closest pub off campus. So you'd walk across campus in winter and stop in at the Wig and usually have a Velvet Cream Stout or a Ballyraggett Red in the middle of winter. It was great fun. But drank a lot of beer there and gained a real appreciation for style and variety. And bloody hell, you wouldn't believe it, but my phone's probably going to run out of flame and battery. I'll put the charger on. We've had a few upsets with the audio.
It is Bent Brewers Live. We usually have a few little hurdles that we need to get through each time we do this. Don't forget to send in ask your best question. Go in the draw to win a great merch pack and some beer. So make sure, send through some questions and we'll fire them to Asher or I'll answer them myself. So Stomping Ground, Ash, you had all these plans to open more venues and more brew pubs, I guess, in Melbourne, and fortunately COVID sort of derailed that for a little bit. How's
It
it
did.
all been at Stomping Ground?
Well, I mean, it's been pretty good at Stomping Ground. We've managed to. Fortunately, we have a canning line, which not all breweries do, not all brew pubs do. We started as a brew pub and have steadily made our way up to becoming a bit of a production facility. But yeah, we've been pretty fortunate. We had about a month off, like a lot of people did, and then we started packing a fair few cans, and it's been getting busier ever since then. So ever since sort of mid to late April, which is good. And now it's getting a lot busier with the kegs. We had started, I don't know whether everyone or anyone down there has been to the airport, been through Terminal 3 at the start of the year. We had Stomping Ground brew pub there as well, which actually had a brewery in it. We brewed, one of my brewers was out there, Connor, for about a month and a bit. And that was going really well. I mean, there were weeks there where they were doing as much as the venue in town, which is just crazy for an airport.
That's awesome.
And selling a lot of beer. And everything came to a grinding halt, as you can imagine, because all flights, I mean, Virgin, for God's sake, is in a pretty bad way. So, yeah, and that was the terminal that it was in. So hopefully we'll open that up again. Oh, God, I don't know, in the next little while. But we have another brew pub opening down in Moorabbin, which we put the brakes on with starting the demolition work for. That's in the old Philip Morris factory. So Philip Morris, the cigarette company. But yeah, that whole site, which is huge, has been converted into a variety of different things, and we've got one part of that. Can you hear that vibrating noise? Or is that just me?
Yeah, we can hear that. Thanks, Ben, bro. Something will go wrong.
Good. So anyway, we're hoping to start demolition work for that in about a month's time, with the aim of being open in probably about March, April next year. So that's in Moorabbin, which is down in the southeast quarter, which is kind of the fastest growing area of Melbourne in terms of population and housing, etc. So yeah, but the production will still be done at Stomping Ground, the main spot. We've always brewed everything on site. We don't do anything contract, so all canning has always been done by us within the venue.
Yeah, cool. So sessionable sours, what's your take on sessionable sours, and I guess why do you do such a big range of those?
Well, when we first, one of the concepts, one of the ideas that we had when we first opened up was to have a brew pub that would have a variety of different beers on tap, all range of styles, and we weren't going to be a hoppy pub. We weren't going to be, a variety of different dark beers or whatnot. We wanted a real spread of beers, much like what you used to have back in the WIG. We had a total of about 18 taps to work with, and one of the very first beers that I brewed there was a Berliner Weiss. And originally, my idea was that, like, if anyone's had Berliner Weisses, I remember I had one back in about 2003 in Germany, and I couldn't stand the thing because I just couldn't understand why it was so sour. Then I came to like them quite a lot, but they were trying to top it up with a cordial, and I just thought it was ridiculous. So they had a lot of syrups to them, and then we thought, well, what if we make our own syrups and we make them from Australian grown fruit? We either buy concentrates of Australian fruit ourselves and buy a few other things, and we try and sell that to a pub and have them not as sweet, but have it with a bit of a fruit element. And the mechanics behind getting that into a pub and making it work was a bit too much. And so then we started drinking Goses, and we spoke about it at work as if, well, we can add fruit. And we did that a lot, in keg, a whole range of different fruits, like from passion fruit and guava and all the rest of it, watermelon and pineapple. And then we did mixed fruits. And then as soon as we started canning, it was one of the first seasonals we did was a sour. It was a smash. And that was an easier way to get that fruit flavour in a more natural form, have it ferment out and have a nice, refreshing, albeit sort of briny, which briny is a funny word because you don't really associate briny with being refreshing, but it is. Like, you think of electrolytes or you think of drinking a Powerade, it is refreshing, and so is a tart Gose. So yeah, instead of going down the cordial path or the concentrate path and adding it at bar, so you could have it either without or with, we just went natural flavour in ferment and not as sweet, but still there. So still very much a beer with a fruit flavour added, or a natural fruit flavour in it.
Yeah, awesome. And the process to actually make the Gose, obviously, Gose is use bacteria. Are you guys doing that? A lot of breweries, making sour beers or Goses or Berliner Weisses for that matter, are just simply adding lactic acid to the beer.
No.
And you can make okay beers. We did that originally, and then we've now changed to I think what you do, and that is do a lactic basically fermentation first.
Yep. So when we first started doing it, and I used to have such a bloody roundabout process to doing it. But I used to do all my souring in the mash tun. So the very first time I tried it, and I never did that again, was to sour on grain, complete sour in the mash, and then extract the next day and boil off. I pretty quickly didn't want to do that, so I devised a way to get it off the grain into the kettle, pasteurize quickly, chill back down through the heat exchanger, put it back into the mash tun, which I would have cleaned with caustic and like gurneyed and all the rest of it, got in and scrubbed, added the bacteria, soured overnight, transferred back in. So it was like a double loop of the whole brew house. And we did this for a bit, and then it became pretty tiresome once we started selling more and more of the stuff. And you could only really do 1 or 2 batches at a time, because you could do that cycle twice and then have the first one finishing the kettle, the second one finishing the mash tun, and then boil them off again and go from there. And so then we started just pumping straight into a fermenter, and we we add the bacteria in fermenter, leave it until it's sour, and then transfer back out of fermenter, back through into the mash tun, through into the kettle, and then we cycle through and just boil off then. And then that fermenter, we take all the seals off, cook them in a pressure cooker, do the complete CIP again, and reuse that for whether it's for that beer or another beer afterwards. And obviously do all the appropriate testing. And we only have one hose that we go back and forth from that fermenter. So from that fermenter back into the brew house. So that's the sour hose. And we haven't had any problem with bacteria pickup on other things or cross-contamination or anything. So that's now the process.
I personally think that's a little bit overkill, especially when you have lots of hot water lying around in your brewery and you can run 85-degree hot water through hoses and stuff like that. I reckon that's what we do. Who knows what we might do in the future? Maybe we'll have a whole different setup doing sour beers, but we do a similar process now. And I guess moving into our beer now, which is a Gose as well, and it's a cherry Gose. So we've added cherry to this beer, much the same as you, whilst it's still fermenting. But doing the souring process first and then pumping it back to the kettle. We quickly realised the last couple of weeks that when we do that, we can't make as much beer as what we do, and we normally have to worry about the second run. So it certainly does put a bit of strain on the brew house and the fermenter lineup, but certainly well worth it. The thing I like about the Gose really is the salt part of it and how that plays with the acid from the lactic. You guys are adding salt to yours?
Yep. We add salt in kettle on the first round. So pre-souring, we add the salt, and then but I mean it's not. This is probably maybe a little bit saltier than I reckon our cherry sour. This is really nice though. I've had some Goses that are bloody way too salty, but I kind of just worked it out based on a taste. And
we're adding a kilo of salt per 10 hectolitre. So 5 kilos we're adding to a 50 hect batch.
Okay, so you're about double what we do. Yeah. No, that's a bit more than us. There you go.
For those people out there, Gose came around a town in Germany called Gose Or in the 13th century and sort of morphed through to another town in Germany which has really salty water, and that's sort of where that saltiness sort of comes from. And that's why that, I guess, that synonymous character with that beer style. You've got a massive range of yours, though. Do you find that a logistic nightmare doing pineapple, guava, watermelon, I heard you say cherry, black currant you've done.
Yeah, we've done a few. It's more of a nightmare if you're trying to can those things because all the logistics that go around labelling and the rest of it. But then the fruit additions is a relatively simple part of the equation, and I tend to do the same amount, with the exception of the watermelon. I do the same amount of juice per litre or per batch, or per kilo of puree per batch, whether it's passion fruit, guava, or cherry, or the rest of it. Like there might be 10% difference either way, but it's not really in the scheme of things. When you're talking about 200 and 220 kilos, it's not a huge amount. So that side of it's fairly easy. It's all added in fermenter. The only difference is if you have some of the fruits which are unpasteurised and then you have to treat them, which we do through the kettle. We just pasteurise them in the kettle and add pectinase there and then run them through the heat exchanger into the fermenter mid-ferment. So, yeah, it's a lot of fruit to juggle, and honestly, if you wanted to, less is better. If you're doing, particularly when you're doing other types of beer, when you've got the brew house, again, this is another thing that ties up the brew house, which you were talking about before, reboiling. You're tying it up again when you're trying to, pasteurise fruit. So we do have a second kettle, which we haven't yet had commissioned, which was the original kettle. We need to have the burner commission on that. Obviously, things have been a little bit slower this year, and there's been less of a push for it since the Cororo came by. But that's happening in the coming weeks, and so that will make our life just a little bit easier, so we don't tie up the brew house for a second round.
Yeah. We did this great trip some years ago over to the US and went to hop selection and got to, participate in that and choose our hops. I'm sort of feeling, I'm sort of missing that this year when we haven't been able to get over there.
Yeah.
I'm hoping we've got some sort of selection opportunity coming up where some samples are being sent out. Are you doing that? What are your thoughts on hop selection this year?
Oh, this is something I was really hoping to get over to this year. I mean, I'd had planned to do that, and to be perfectly honest, now that everything's sort of opened up and the rush to try and get ourselves prepped, I haven't really thought much about it, to be honest. And I'd like to be able to invest more time in it at the moment, but I can't. It's going to have to be something that gets pushed back to next year. I think I'll just trust that. You can do the selection for us, maybe, Rich. What are you going to do? Have you done the virtual stuff or not?
Yeah, I had a bit of a look at some of the virtual stuff. I think we're getting some samples sent out, and we'll sit around with the team and go through those and try and figure out which batches of hops we want to get hold of.
Do they do the full analysis of it with oils, etc., or is it just?
Yeah, they do. So we should get all that information and be able to make sort of informed decisions on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess how are you finding the beer market down there in Melbourne, and what are you seeing? Obviously, before COVID, it was a bit different to what it is now. But as you now sort of come out of COVID, and Australia's looking pretty good at the moment, what do you think's going to happen with the beer market now?
I can speak from Melbourne pretty well, and particularly with. Like if you compare, I don't really know what New South Wales is like because to be honest, we don't sell a lot up there, and Queensland and Western Australia we sell a bit. But what we've found here that it doesn't really matter on the season. You'll sell a lot of the sours like we're drinking now, which has just been a little bit mind blowing this year. Whether this year it's because we've got more of a name for it, or whether people at home are just wanting to drink sours if they're sitting around. I don't know. Like I really can't explain.
Well, that's really funny because Jacob's put a question up there. I know a couple of people, non-beer drinkers, who love Stomping Ground sours and have likened them to fruity ciders that they love. Is accessibility something you're trying for? Or is it just a lucky aspect of the brew?
I don't know.
Accessibility means can you get them all around Australia or just in Melbourne? But
no, I think Perth. I'm pretty sure we send quite a bit over to Perth, to WA, and as far as New South Wales go, I'm really not sure. And Queensland at this point, I know that we sort of slowed right up on sending a lot of stock out or interstate, apart from Perth, because we've already got a pretty decent line there. But In Melbourne, in particular, you can get it at a lot of places, whether it's Dan's or anywhere with, like, from your local IGAs and whatnot, and your bottle marts, they all sort of stock this sort of stuff. My local IGA has it, and a local bottle mart has, I think, 3 of our sours, but then First Choice will have it and Coles will have it as well. So the chains will have it as well as the independents. So it's pretty readily accessible down here. And to be honest, 95% or thereabouts of what we sell, what we produce, is sold in Victoria, whether it be keg or can. So, yeah,
is that the plan? Is that the plan going forward? I know your space at Stomping Ground there is pretty tight. But there are a couple of other sheds around. Are you looking at grabbing another shed?
Yeah, well, that'd be nice. I don't know. I've tried. You know the story there. It's been a discussion for a few years now, but I don't know. There's always the plan changes all the time, from being, do we want to stay local? Do we want to try and expand? Do we want to stay local? And there's a bit of push and pull there. I'm pretty happy being in Victoria. I'm pretty happy to keep the beer close to home, and I do like to send it off. If you've got a few select places you can send in a state, and this is not really my place to talk too much about it because I'm not a salesperson, but or marketing. But as a brewer, I like to drink beer that's fairly close to the home, unless you know that it's being churned through pretty well. So, I mean, I drink your beer, Rich, when I go back to Inverell, and I think which is in northern New South Wales, for anyone who doesn't know where that is, that's where I grew up. And I see your beer up at the Tats Hotel there at the drive-through, and it's actually pretty fresh every time I get it. Well, this is great, which is very funny. But so that's my drink of choice when I go home. And it'd be funny if I was able to get Stomping Ground up there, but it's not something I'd expect, because it's that little bit further to go, across another border. But anyway, I don't know. I'm pretty happy with a good foothold in Melbourne and keeping it that way. But yeah,
my brother looks after the sales for the Tats Hotel up there in Inverell. So thanks to Pete there for doing a good job and getting the beer out there around rural New South Wales. It's awesome. So what's new, Asher? What's going to be the next thing in beer? What's your take on these seltzers, first of all? I feel like we've got our own seltzer here anyway.
Mate, yeah. God. It's not really brewing, is it? I would never go to a pub to drink one, and I don't have anything against people drinking them. I don't really think it's beer, because are you using a grain base, or it's just sugar? I don't really know much about them. It's just sugar, basically, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's just fermented sugar, and then you literally add some flavourings to it. But, I haven't actually looked into it. I'm not at all interested in making a seltzer.
No.
I'll be long gone before a seltzer's made at Ben Spoke. But not sure how it fits in with the definition of beer, and whether the excise applies to it like beer, or whether it's really an RTD. Maybe that's something for the lovely ATA people around Australia to maybe keep an eye on.
I think the how do you determine that, though, unless it's distilled with the RTD? It has to. That's one of the ways of getting around it, isn't it? By just fermenting it with just straight sugar.
Yeah, well, maybe
instead of using a spirit. Oh, anyway, yeah, we're not going to do one. You won't see one from Stomping Ground, not while I'm there. Kind of like you.
Let's drink to that. Cheers.
Yeah,
what about non-alcoholic beer?
No, this is an area we have spoken pretty heavily about. Like, I'm keen for a very low ABV beer. I'm not necessarily. I'd like it to still be, heavily malt based product. So you still do the brew process, because brewing is, we are brewers at the end of the day. We extract the sugar from the grain, add the hops, and then whether we produce a lot of alcohol or very little alcohol out of it, it's still brewing and fermenting. So if we were able to do that and extract the alcohol and use that for another purpose and not have as much alcohol in the beer, I'd be all up for that. Or if we were able to get a really low alcohol ferment and pasteurize, which we're not going to be able to do for a long time because we can't afford a pasteurizer, I'd be up for that as well. But I look forward to this becoming more available in Australia. I do actually like flavoursome low ABV beers. I also like flavoursome high ABV beers. So,
Yeah.
but it's it's something that there are a lot of people still that drink drive, and I'd rather there were less people that drink drive.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sort of on your I'm the same as you. Love to make a really low alcohol beer full of flavour.
Yeah.
And just how we go through that, work out that process to do that, but still deliver a really good flavoursome beer. I think is the challenge, and I think when we duck up for a bit of air next year after the summer rush, we might look at trying to work on a bit of a process to try and because I think it's probably is a good thing. There's a responsible part of it. I think we all like drinking beer all the time. Fortunately, we can't drink beer all the time, or some of us can, but most of us do probably. But it'd be good to drink a little bit less alcohol potentially, so that we can drink beer all the time.
No, I agree.
What else are you working on? What's one of the new beers coming out in Stomping Ground?
We've got.
You don't have to tell us all the secrets, but
no, we've got a watermelon and mint and cucumber sour that's coming out fairly soon, which I'll tip in the glass pretty soon. Bloody hell! Sorry, I just tried to scull an IPA that I had in a glass. I'm limited with glasses here at the moment. I must apologise. So we did one that was in. It's a labelled one. Most of our cans are printed except for the seasonals. It's a labelled one. So we did a watermelon, cucumber and mint beer. Very low. It's kind of like the seltzer. Very low finishing gravity. And just in time for spring. We're hoping that things were going to open up a bit sooner in spring. So that's been released. You've got the watermelon there with you now, don't you?
Yeah.
Basically the same thing, but we used watermelon juice, equal amount of cucumber juice, and then a bunch of mint juice. So
sounds great.
Fairly subtle though, really, but that
probably
one
go
there,
well with a shot of gin in it.
Yeah, no, they do. They really do.
Carlos has got a question up there. Stomping Ground have solar in their pub. Talk about your solar and what you do with that.
I know that we have solar. The whole roof is covered in solar, but it's as far as how much it actually produces and generates, I can't add too much to that. But it's something we've done. We have a lot more roof space that could fit more solar, and I'd be pretty happy to get a lot more of it on there. To be honest, because Melbourne is fairly sunny in summer. It's not as sunny as Canberra, but it's fairly sunny. Have you got solar at your joint?
No, we don't. And Carlos, thanks for bringing that up. We actually had one of our final meetings today on getting solar installed on our roof, and we're going to go for these little pods that potentially are removable. We got a few more tanks coming in at some point, and we'll probably have to lift them through the roof. So we need to be able to make sure everything's removable and so that we can pull it away, pull the roof off, chuck the tank in, put it all back together. We don't want to make it too complicated. So it'll be good for us. Obviously, we use a fair bit of electricity. When we took over the site, we had to upgrade the power and put in our own transformer to give ourselves a really good power supply into this site. It had okay power, but didn't have enough for our purposes. So it'd be good to be able to create some solar. And like you say, Canberra's awesome for solar. So we're looking at doing that. So, Carlos, thanks for bringing that up. We fortunately can't do it at the brew pub because we're part of a body corporate, a bigger building, and there actually isn't a lot of roof space, and there's a bloody lot of skylights on the roof. So make it a bit hard to do in the brew pub, but certainly out the cannery, we're gonna do solar there, and also we have a warehouse a few doors down, and we're looking at doing it there as well. So that'll be something great to do. Part of our sustainability program that we're getting heavily into. How do you guys? That was one of my questions I was going to ask you. Knowing your owners, Steve and Guy, are heavily into everything. And how does sustainability go at Stomping Ground?
It's always been something we've tried to be as good at as possible. And as I said, I said before, the whole roof, but we've got more space. So the whole roof of our original warehouse at 100 Gibbs Street is covered in solar panels. We've also got 96A and 96B, which are free of solar panels at the moment, but could use a lot more if possible. And I hope that we get to the point that we can do that. But it's also, apart from just the solar aspect, there's a huge amount of water that we can capture off it. It's quite a big catchment. So we do catch some of that and we reuse it for the garden that's inside. We have done a bloody cost benefit on capturing that and then using that for washing the floor space down. But we haven't, that was all set to go ahead and then COVID hit. I shouldn't keep using that as an excuse for things, but I think that's probably the only.
Well, I think it's been an excuse for all of us, though, hasn't it? No, it's changed the way we live, changed the way we work, changed the, change. It's sort of, you can't really plan anything at the moment.
No, it's a real bugger.
You never know what's around the corner.
No, but all these things are in the pipeline, and we've done the costings on it, etc. And it's all been given approval. So we've got water that we use for the garden as it stands, and we're then going to use that water and pump it across to something which we've got a tank that chills the compressors for our chiller. So basically like a heat exchanger or like a coolant, it runs hot water around the outside of the chiller compressors and it gets, chiller compressors get quite hot. It heats that water then up to about 50 or 60 degrees. We can use that for clean down once it's passed through a filter, etc. So we can just use that for cleaning down the floors, etc., or filling up the CIP or the keg washer, anything like that. So that's another heat recovery and energy reuse sort of thing. But other than that, I mean, the reason I harp on about solar, we use aluminium cans, so they're recyclable. That doesn't really, as long as people recycle, that's great. But I think solar, I have a big space in my heart for it because there's so much sun in Australia, and it's really one of the best things we can do. So I think a business like ours should really push forward with that and as much water saving as you can possibly do, because at the end of the day, the grain's always going to go to a farmer. There's no wastage there. It's not like we're tipping grain out, but sun and water.
Awesome. So inspirations, who do you seek inspiration from in terms of brewers, potentially overseas, but also locally?
You know what? The funny thing about this year is you kind of get, because I don't, and I must admit, I don't follow as much as the hype. I'm not on the socials anymore, but when Oktoberfest came around this year, I started drinking a lot of German beers. I started looking back just prior to that at through there's an old porter book that Jimmy, one of the guys who works in the brewery, brought in, and we started experimenting with old recipes, old porter recipes, and just different yeasts. And I mean, I've spoken to you a lot since I've been a brewer, Rich, and asked you about things whenever I've had trouble along the way. And Sean Sherlock is another person I've spoken a lot to. Spoken about yeast with him in particular a lot because he's quite good with the yeast. And I'm doing a bit of I'm going back. I'm going retro. I really love yeast, and I've gone sort of fallen in love with it again, moving away from hops and going back to malt, and have experimented on a few smaller batches with English style beers, which is kind of what you do when you first get into brewing. I mean, you know it as well. Yeah. And I'm really loving it. It helps that Melbourne's really cold, so you can drink those malt heavy, yeast heavy beers for a lot longer through the year. Yeah. That, and then Oktoberfest and a lot of the fresh German lagers that we had come in. We bought some off one of the importers down here, and my local bloody bottle mart actually had some really fresh Weinstefaner, Pilsner and Keller beer and Fest beer. And when you have them fresh, their Pilsner is impeccable. It's just so good. And you'd love to be able to make a beer like that. And so that's kind of that. I don't know, and it might be boring and it might be a thing of the past, but I love them.
Well, I actually think we should see lager come back. I think It's clearly one of the hardest beers to consistently make well, and it needs dedication. It needs. It is all about. The yeast plays a massive part in lager, and in the integration of the malt characters as well. Really important. Hops a lot less so. I think we can see a cycle of lager coming back into into at the front of everyone's minds a little bit more than just hoppy beers. Like we're so into hoppy beers at the moment. And I love hoppy beers. I love making IPA, but there's more to beer than just hops. So I think lager. It'd be great to see lager come back, and I mean we're sort of at the mercy of the consumer. So we need the consumer to get on board and appreciate lager for really what it is. And there's a place for lager in everyone's weekly drinking habits. So, yeah, I think it'd be really good to get lager back. Would we see a Stomping Ground lager?
We've got Stomping Ground Laneway Lager, and that's one. It's actually probably the beer that we've spent the most time on. We've got a pretty decent sensory program at the moment, run by a girl called Lindsay Astorita, and Rich, you've met Lindsay, and we've been trying to work on our lager and what we can do with the yeast to get better flavour, what we can do with the malt for a little while now, and we've just changed. Done a bit of a radical change with yeast, and it's looking pretty good so far. So we've got that in can, we've got that in keg. It's one of our highest sellers in keg, but it's the sort of thing that you can notice if you're trained. You can notice any fault so easily.
Yeah.
So that's why we spend so much time on it. We're like, fuck, maybe we should tighten up on this, and it's not that the average punter may not notice. It's kind of that you're so attuned to thinking about it because we all love them as well, right? So we've got that. We've got a German Pilsner that we make, and again, I want to try and tighten up on that, particularly after drinking Weihenstephaner. That's just there's nothing out of place in that beer, and you drink that and you think I'd love to make something like that, or I'd love to have something like that readily available all the time. But yeah,
I think Hellas. When you go to Germany and you're sitting there, in a one of the German beer halls and drinking some really good Hellas or German Pilsner, but more so Hellas. You do appreciate the history and just what goes into making really good lager. So
yeah,
but it's also quite a change in a brewery setup to make really good lager. You need that tank space. You need that extra time. You can't rush lager. When we make a lager, but 2 to 3 weeks lagering time is the most that we can possibly give it, which isn't enough really to make the best lager we could possibly make.
Yeah, no, we're in the same boat. No, but yeast plays an important part. You already said that, so try and...
Paul's put a question up. Could seltzers be cider based? Paul, don't know enough about seltzers to really answer that one. They could be. I can't see why they couldn't be. Ash, you got a take on that one?
Again, I don't really know much about them. I thought they were just hot water and sugar put in a bucket and then added fruit flavour and fermented. I really don't know.
I mean,
I'm not trying to be an arsehole.
And then flavoured. So it's really, really unlikely that you'd use cider because you're starting with also a really low pH, which would be hard to potentially balance off. But who knows? Somebody will probably make a seltzer out of cider.
It's kind of isn't one of the key things. Not that I know much about it. Is one of the key ideas that it's meant to be low allergen because it's kind of just soda water, alcoholic soda water with a flavouring in it, so you don't have any risk and no fat and no sugar and all the rest of it.
Oh, I think it's maybe, but yeah, like you, I haven't done any research on it. Tasted one, I think, since they've started coming out, and really, that's as far as I've got. It sort of doesn't. There's so many other beers and beer styles that I'd like to make. Talking about those German beers, we did a great Oktoberfest here, and making a Doppelbock again and a Hefeweizen and a Rauch beer was really, really good fun. Doing different styles, not just the usual 22 IPAs that we have on tap at any one time.
22.
Ash, we're winding it up here. One final thought from you. What do you got to say to everyone out there?
Well, I hope that most of your crowd from Canberra Town.
Sorry?
Are most of the crowd up there from Canberra Town tonight, do you reckon? Or they're from
No, they're probably usually we get a pretty mixed audience we've got people from Victoria on and Sydney and
excellent. Oh, cool. It's good to be involved. Thanks for having me here today. The beer industry in Australia is still looking very healthy after what was going to be what could have been a very tumultuous year. And I think most people I speak to are pretty confident about where they are now, as opposed to March 31st when we're talking to suppliers and brewers. They were all fairly scared, and now everyone's a bit more confident and happy. So it's good. I think. A big
shout out to all the consumers out there that have supported, the local breweries during this pandemic. We really appreciate all the support that you've given us. Obviously, by that I mean you've been buying all our beer and been keeping us busy, been keeping people employed in jobs. So thank you.
Indeed.
And hopefully you'll all still continue to enjoy our beers even when we're out of the pandemic as well. Just remind everyone about our lid. Apparently people didn't hear it earlier, but the 360-degree lid's only on the sprocket at the moment. Unfortunately, it's been banned by the New South Wales EPA from March 21 next year. So apparently it contributes to the litter stream. Little Ben Spoke lid contributing to the litter stream up there in New South Wales. Not sure that that's really relevant. Feels like they are picking on the small guy. We're going to fight it. We're going to try and get our lid back. So stay tuned for that. So that's why you see the other more traditional lid on our cans. Thanks to Ash for coming on. It's always good having a chat. Shame we couldn't be doing it in person and having a beer together, but I'm sure we'll figure that out pretty soon.
We'll figure that out over summer.
We'll be back in a few weeks with another episode of Bent Brewers Live. Thanks to everyone for coming on. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.